Chapter 1. The Factory on Ryon, 7. A dangerous job. On the industrial planet of Ryon, 7, massive factories churn day and night, producing components for starships, weapons, and every imaginable piece of technology. The air was thick with smoke, and the constant roar of machinery drowned out everything but the most urgent alarms. The workers here were a mix of species from across the galaxy, drawn by desperation and necessity to this grueling, dangerous place. Among the workers was Ethan Cross, a human mechanic assigned to maintenance on the assembly lines. He was known for his sharp eyes and quick reflexes, qualities that had kept him alive in a place where one misstep could mean disaster. Ethan didn't particularly enjoy his job, but it paid enough to keep him fed and housed in the worker barracks. One day, as Ethan inspected a faulty conveyor belt, he noticed a new worker nearby, a small, alien girl with delicate features and silvery skin that shimmered faintly under the harsh factory lights. She seemed out of place in the grimy, hazardous environment, her large, glowing violet eyes filled with both curiosity and fear. Ethan approached her during a break, wiping grease off his hands. "Hey, you new here?" The girl flinched at his voice but nodded. "Yes. My name is Lyra. I just started today." "You don't look like you belong in a place like this," Ethan said, eyeing her thin frame. "This job's dangerous, even for experienced workers." "I don't have a choice," Lyra replied softly. "I need the credits." Ethan frowned but didn't push further. He'd seen too many people forced into tough situations to judge. Instead, he offered a small smile. "All right, Lyra. If you ever need help, let me know. This place can be rough." Lyra gave him a shy nod, her glowing eyes flicking to the ground. "Thank you." A close call. The factory operated at breakneck speed, its massive machinery moving with relentless precision. Conveyor belts carried heavy loads, robotic arms welded components, and hydraulic presses came down with crushing force. Safety protocols were minimal, and accidents were common. Ethan was repairing a malfunctioning sensor near one of the larger machines when he noticed Lyra working nearby. She seemed focused, carefully assembling components as the conveyor belt carried them past her. But her inexperience showed she moved hesitantly, often glancing around nervously. As Ethan watched, a loose piece of metal fell from a higher level, landing on the conveyor belt near Lyra. She didn't notice it until it was too late. The metal jammed the belt, causing the machinery to seize up and lurch violently. The sudden movement knocked Lyra off balance, and she stumbled toward a massive hydraulic press that was still active. Ethan's heart raced as he saw what was about to happen. Without thinking, he bolted toward her, yelling, "Lyra, move!" She turned, wide-eyed, but froze in fear as the press descended. Ethan lunged forward, grabbing her arm and yanking her out of the way just as the press slammed down with a deafening crash. Both of them tumbled to the ground, Ethan shielding Lyra with his body as debris rained down around them. The factory's emergency alarms blared, and workers scrambled to shut down the machinery. "You okay?" Ethan asked, his voice breathless. Lyra nodded shakily, her glowing eyes filled with gratitude and fear. "Why, yes. Thank you." Ethan helped her to her feet, his grip firm but gentle. "You've got to be more careful. This place doesn't give second chances." Lyra looked down, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry." Ethan sighed, softening his tone. "It's not your fault. Come on, let's get out of here before the foreman shows up." The aftermath. The incident left Ethan shaken. He couldn't get Lyra out of his mind, not just because of how close she'd come to dying, but because of the vulnerability in her eyes. She was clearly out of her depth, and it bothered him more than he cared to admit. Later that evening, as the workers gathered in the barracks, Ethan spotted Lyra sitting alone in a corner, her head bowed. He grabbed 2 meal packs from the dispenser and made his way over to her. "Here," he said, handing her one of the packs. "You need to eat." Lyra looked up, surprised, and accepted the pack with trembling hands. "Thank you." Ethan sat beside her, opening his own pack. "So, what's your story? Why'd you end up here?" Lyra hesitated before answering. "My planet was destroyed. My family is gone. I came here because it was the only place that would hire me." Ethan's chest tightened at her words. He'd heard similar stories before, but hearing it from Lyra made it hit harder. "I'm sorry," he said. No one should have to go through that. Lyra managed a small smile. You've been kind to me, Ethan. More than anyone else here. Just looking out for a friend, he said with a shrug. We've got to stick together in a place like this. Lyra's smile widened slightly, her eyes shining with a hint of hope. For the first time since arriving on Ryon 7, she didn't feel completely alone. Chapter 2. Shadows in the Factory. The Factory's Hidden Dangers. The following morning, the factory resumed its brutal rhythm. The metallic roar of machinery reverberated through the cavernous interior, drowning out everything but shouted orders and the occasional warning siren. Workers moved like automatons, their faces weary and expressionless, as they toiled under the ever-watchful eyes of supervisors. Ethan couldn't shake the unease from the previous day. Saving Lyra from the hydraulic press had rattled him more than he wanted to admit. The memory of her wide, terrified eyes stuck with him, but something else gnawed at the back of his mind, the machine itself. He'd worked with those presses for years, and he knew their systems inside and out. For the press to malfunction so violently, it didn't feel like an accident. Determined to ease his doubts, Ethan headed toward the maintenance bay during his first break. As he passed the rows of massive machines, he spotted Lyra at her workstation. Her delicate hands moved with deliberate care, assembling components as the conveyor belt carried them past her. She was slower than the other workers, but her concentration was unwavering. "Hey, Lyra," Ethan called out softly, stepping closer. She flinched at his voice, her glowing violet eyes darting to him before relaxing. "Oh, hi, Ethan. Doing okay?" he asked, his tone casual but concerned. Lyra nodded, though her expression was hesitant. "I think so. I'm trying to be more careful." "Good," Ethan said with a faint smile. "Just don't push yourself too hard. This place doesn't exactly care about its workers." Lyra managed a small, grateful smile before returning to her work. Ethan lingered for a moment, then continued toward the maintenance bay, his mind still preoccupied with the faulty press. A disturbing discovery. The maintenance bay was one of the quieter areas of the factory, reserved for repairs and diagnostics. Ethan grabbed his tools and made his way to the hydraulic press that had nearly killed Lyra. The massive machine loomed over him, its surface still scorched from the emergency shutdown. Using a portable diagnostic scanner, Ethan began inspecting the press's systems. At first, everything seemed normal: wear and tear on the gears, slight misalignment in the conveyor belt, but as he delved deeper into the machine's software, his unease grew. "Come on, what are you hiding?" Ethan muttered, scrolling through lines of data. Then he found it. A subroutine buried in the system logs, a deliberate override command that had forced the press to engage at maximum force, bypassing all safety protocols. The timestamp matched the exact moment of Lyra's accident. Ethan's stomach turned. Someone had tampered with the machine, and it wasn't a simple glitch. This was intentional. "What the hell?" he whispered, his hands tightening around the scanner. Before he could investigate further, the sound of footsteps echoed behind him. Ethan quickly shut off the scanner and turned, masking his unease. "Cross," a supervisor barked, a burly human with a scar running down his cheek. "What are you doing here?" "Routine maintenance," Ethan replied evenly, holding up his toolkit. "Thought I'd check on yesterday's incident." The supervisor's eyes narrowed. "Factory's running fine. You don't need to waste time on that old machine. Get back to your station." Ethan forced a nod, his mind racing. "Got it." As the supervisor left, Ethan's jaw tightened. Whoever had sabotaged the press didn't want anyone asking questions. And now, Ethan had become one of those questions. Lyra's warning. Later that evening, as the workers filed into the barracks, Ethan spotted Lyra sitting alone in her usual corner. Her silvery skin seemed dimmer under the harsh lights, and her shoulders were hunched as if trying to make herself invisible. Ethan approached, holding 2 meal packs. "Mind some company?" Lyra looked up, her violet eyes wide with surprise. "Oh, sure." He handed her one of the packs and sat down beside her. "How was your shift?" Lyra hesitated, her fingers fidgeting with the meal pack. "It was okay. I didn't mess anything up." "You're doing fine," Ethan reassured her. "Better than most rookies." Lyra gave him a small smile, but it quickly faded. "Ethan, I've been thinking about yesterday. About the accident." Ethan's gaze sharpened. "What about it?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. I don't think it was an accident. Ethan's pulse quickened. Why do you say that? Lyra glanced around nervously before leaning closer. I overheard some of the supervisors talking. They said something about a trial run and collateral damage. I don't know what it means, but it sounded wrong. Ethan clenched his jaw, his suspicions confirmed. The sabotage wasn't just random, it was part of something bigger. And whatever it was, Lyra was caught in the middle. We need to be careful, he said, keeping his voice low. Don't trust anyone here, especially the supervisors. Lyra nodded, her hands trembling. What do we do? Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't leave this alone, not with Lyra's life on the line. But if they were going to uncover the truth, they had to tread carefully. We figure out what they're hiding, he said, but we don't do it alone. The storage wing. Ethan spent the next few days gathering information, carefully avoiding suspicion. He noticed patterns in the supervisor's behavior. Certain areas of the factory were off-limits, guarded by security drones and locked doors. The storage wing was one such area, and it was where Ethan suspected the truth was hidden. One night, after most of the workers had gone to bed, Ethan and Lyra snuck out of the barracks. The factory was eerily silent, its machinery powered down for routine maintenance. Shadows danced across the walls as they made their way to the storage wing. Are you sure about this? Lyra whispered, her voice trembling. No, Ethan admitted. But if we don't do this, we'll never know what's going on. Using a stolen access card, they slipped through the locked doors into the storage wing. The air was colder here, and the faint hum of machinery echoed in the distance. Rows of massive crates filled the space, their surfaces marked with alien symbols. What is all this? Lyra murmured, her glowing eyes scanning the room. Ethan opened one of the crates, his breath catching as he saw its contents. Inside were advanced alien devices, sleek, polished, and glowing faintly with energy. Some resembled medical equipment, while others looked like weapons or restraints. This isn't factory equipment, Ethan muttered. This is Dash. Before he could finish, a loud clang echoed through the storage wing. Heavy footsteps approached, accompanied by the low hum of security drones. Hide, Ethan hissed, pulling Lyra behind a stack of crates. They crouched in the shadows as two armed guards entered the room, their plasma rifles glowing ominously. One of them spoke into a comm device. Storage wing's clear, the guard said. No signs of tampering. The shipment's ready for transport. Good, a voice crackled back. Make sure it leaves on schedule. The client doesn't tolerate delays. Ethan and Lyra exchanged a glance, their fear replaced by determination. Whatever was happening in the factory, it wasn't just about producing starship parts. They had stumbled onto something far more dangerous. Chapter 3, Beneath the Surface. A dangerous revelation. Ethan and Lyra crouched behind the crates in the storage wing, their breath shallow as the guards moved through the room. The faint glow of the alien devices in the crates cast eerie patterns across the walls, highlighting the stark contrast between the factory's crude industrial machinery and the sleek alien artifacts. Ethan's mind raced. The mention of a shipment and client wasn't just suspicious, was damning. Whatever this factory was producing, it wasn't just starship parts. It was a front for something far darker. As the guards exited the storage wing, Ethan exhaled, his grip on the edge of the crate loosening. They're smuggling alien tech, he muttered, barely loud enough for Lyra to hear. Lyra's violet eyes shimmered with worry. What kind of tech? And why would they risk this? Ethan scanned the contents of the open crate again. His eyes fell on a device resembling a neural harness, its wires glowing faintly with energy. Military tech, maybe, he guessed. Weapons, cybernetics, or worse tech for experiments. Lyra shuddered at the thought, her silvery skin dimming slightly. If they find us here. They won't, Ethan said, trying to sound confident. But we can't leave this alone. If we don't do something, more people more like you're going to get hurt. Lyra hesitated, then nodded. What do we do now? Ethan pulled a small hollow recorder from his toolkit. First, we get proof. Gathering evidence. Ethan began recording, focusing the hollow recorder on the alien devices. He captured the glowing glyphs, the strange wiring, and the rows of crates stacked throughout the storage wing. As he worked, Lyra kept watch near the entrance, her ears straining for any sign of movement. "Ethan," she whispered after a moment, "what if this gets us killed?" Ethan paused, lowering the recorder. He turned to face her, his expression serious but resolute. "It might, but doing nothing is worse. These people, whoever's running this, don't care about us. They're willing to let workers die to cover this up. If we don't stop them, they'll just keep doing it." Lyra's gaze dropped to the floor, her hands trembling. "I'm scared." Ethan stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I know, but we're in this together, all right? You're not alone." She nodded, her glowing eyes meeting his. "All right." As Ethan returned to recording, he noticed something unusual, a faint hum coming from deeper within the storage wing. It was rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. He exchanged a glance with Lyra, who had heard it too. "What is that?" she asked. "Let's find out," Ethan said, slipping the recorder back into his toolkit. The hidden chamber. Following the hum, Ethan and Lyra moved deeper into the storage wing. The air grew colder, and the glow of the alien devices became brighter. At the far end of the room, they found a heavy door with glowing alien glyphs etched into its surface. Ethan ran his fingers over the glyphs, feeling their faint warmth. "This isn't factory tech. This is alien." Lyra stepped closer, her eyes narrowing as she studied the symbols. "It's a seal. It means containment." "Containment for what?" Ethan asked. Before Lyra could answer, the glyphs pulsed brighter, and the door slid open with a low hiss. Ethan instinctively grabbed Lyra's arm, pulling her back as a rush of cold air escaped the chamber. Inside was a large, circular room filled with glowing pods. Each pod contained a figure, alien, humanoid, and motionless. Their bodies were suspended in a viscous liquid, their features distorted by the curved glass. Ethan's stomach churned. "What the hell is this?" Lyra's voice was barely audible. "Stasis pods. They're alive." Ethan approached one of the pods, his breath fogging the glass. The figure inside was tall and slender, with shimmering blue skin and glowing white eyes that were closed in an eerie stillness. He turned to Lyra, his voice tight. "Why would they keep people like this?" Lyra shook her head, her hands trembling. "I don't know, but this isn't right. We have to stop them." Caught in the act, as they inspected the stasis pods, the sound of boots echoed through the storage wing. Ethan and Lyra froze, their eyes locking. The guards had returned. "Hide," Ethan whispered, pulling Lyra behind a large console in the corner of the chamber. The guards entered the room, their plasma rifles raised. One of them stopped near the entrance, scanning the area. "Looks like someone triggered the seal." "Could be a glitch," the other guard replied. "Or someone's here." Ethan held his breath, his heart pounding in his chest. Beside him, Lyra clenched her hands, her glowing skin dimming as fear overtook her. The first guard moved toward the stasis pods, his rifle aimed at the floor. "If anyone's in here, show yourselves. You've got 3 seconds." Ethan glanced at the console they were hiding behind. It was covered in glowing controls, the alien glyphs shifting in response to their proximity. Desperate for a distraction, he pressed one of the buttons. The room was suddenly filled with a deafening hum as the stasis pods began to glow brighter. The figures inside stirred, their bodies twitching as if waking from a deep sleep. "What the dash?" the guard shouted, backing away from the pods. Ethan grabbed Lyra's hand. "Run." They bolted for the exit as the guard shouted and fired plasma bolts, the shots narrowly missing them. The glowing pods cast an eerie light over the chamber, and the figures inside began to press against the glass, their eyes opening. The guards were too distracted by the chaos to notice Ethan and Lyra slipping out of the room. A desperate plan. Back in the maintenance bay, Ethan and Lyra collapsed behind a stack of crates, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. The glow of the storage wing still haunted their minds, the memory of the stasis pods burning in their thoughts. "What now?" Lyra asked, her voice trembling. Ethan pulled out the hollow recorder and replayed the footage he had captured. The images of the alien devices, the stasis pods, and the glowing glyphs were undeniable proof of the factory's dark secrets. "We expose them," Ethan said. "We get this footage off planet and make sure everyone knows what's going on here." Lyra hesitated. "How?" "The factory controls everything. They'll catch us before we even leave." Ethan's jaw tightened. Not if we're smart. There's a transport leaving tomorrow for a supply run. We get this footage onto that ship, and we're home free. Lyra nodded, though fear still lingered in her eyes. All right, let's do it. The escape. The following day, Ethan and Lyra moved carefully through the factory, avoiding supervisors and guards as they made their way to the loading docks. The transport ship was a massive freighter, its engines rumbling as workers loaded crates onto its cargo bay. Ethan handed Lyra the hollow recorder. You're smaller. You can slip past them easier. Lyra's eyes widened. Me? What about you? I'll distract them, Ethan said, his voice firm. If they catch me, they won't be looking for you. Lyra shook her head. No, we do this together. Before Ethan could argue, the sound of alarms filled the factory. The guards from the storage wing had discovered the open chamber, and they were on high alert. We're out of time, Ethan said. Go. Lyra hesitated, then nodded. Clutching the hollow recorder, she slipped into the shadows, her silvery skin blending with the dim light. Ethan stepped into view, drawing the attention of the guards. Hey, one of them shouted. You. Stop. Ethan bolted, leading the guards away from the loading docks. Plasma bolts scorched the air around him as he darted through the factory, his heart pounding. He didn't know if Lyra had made it to the ship, but he had to trust her. A new beginning. Hours later, as the transport ship left Rylon 7's atmosphere, Lyra sat hidden in the cargo bay, clutching the hollow recorder. She gazed out a small viewport, the planet shrinking in the distance. For the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope. They had the evidence. They had a chance. And Ethan had given her that chance. Chapter 4. The Cost of Truth. A dangerous gamble. Lyra's heart pounded as the transport ship's engines roared, carrying her further from Rylon 7 and the factory's cold, oppressive grasp. Clutching the hollow recorder tightly, she hid behind towering crates in the dimly lit cargo bay. The faint hum of the ship's systems was the only sound, a stark contrast to the chaos she and Ethan had left behind. Her silvery skin shimmered faintly in the low light, and her glowing violet eyes darted nervously around the bay. Ethan had insisted on staying behind to draw the guards away, and she couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. He had risked everything to protect her and expose the factory's secrets. She activated the hollow recorder, replaying the footage Ethan had captured. The alien devices, the stasis pods, and the strange, glowing glyphs filled the small screen. It was undeniable proof of the factory's dark activities. But getting this information into the right hands wouldn't be easy. Ethan, she whispered, her voice trembling, I hope you're okay. A last stand. Back at the factory, Ethan darted through the labyrinth of machinery, the sound of pursuing guards and drones echoing behind him. Plasma bolts scorched the air, narrowly missing him as he weaved between conveyor belts and towering equipment. He reached the maintenance bay and quickly sealed the doors behind him, buying himself a few precious moments. Sweat dripped down his face as he frantically searched for anything that could buy Lyra more time. His eyes landed on a stack of explosive charges used for demolishing old machinery. A grim smile crossed his face. If they want to chase me, they're gonna regret it. Ethan rigged the charges to the main conveyor system, setting a timer for 5 minutes. As the seconds ticked away, he grabbed his comm unit and sent a final message to Lyra. Lyra, if you're hearing this, I want you to know you've got this. Get that footage out there. Make them pay for what they've done. And don't come back for me. The comm crackled, but there was no reply. Ethan's smile faded. Good luck, kid. The doors burst open, and the guards stormed in. Ethan raised his hands, feigning surrender. Took you long enough. One of the guards sneered. You're dead, Cross. Maybe, Ethan replied, glancing at the timer behind him. But not before I take you with me. The explosives detonated, engulfing the maintenance bay in a fiery explosion. The shockwave rippled through the factory, sending workers and guards scrambling for cover. The main conveyor system collapsed in a cascade of sparks and debris, grinding the factory's operations to a halt. Delivering the evidence. The transport ship reached a neutral trading hub in the Atheron system, a bustling space station where beings from across the galaxy mingled. Lyra disembarked cautiously, keeping to the shadows as she navigated the crowded corridors. She had to find someone who could help someone with the power to expose the factory's crimes. After hours of searching, she found herself in a dimly lit cantina, where smugglers, traders, and bounty hunters gathered. At the back of the room sat a tall, imposing figure-8 human woman with sharp features and piercing green eyes. Her clothing bore the insignia of the Galactic Protectorate, an interstellar organization dedicated to justice and peacekeeping. Lyra approached hesitantly, clutching the hollow recorder. "Excuse me, are you with the Protectorate?" The woman looked up, her gaze sharp. "Who's asking?" Lyra swallowed hard. "My name is Lyra. I have proof of something terrible. A factory on Rylon 7. They re-smuggling alien technology and experimenting on living beings." The woman leaned forward, her interest piqued. "Show me." Lyra placed the hollow recorder on the table and activated it. The images of the stasis pods, the alien devices, and the glowing glyphs played out before them. The woman's expression darkened as she watched. "This is serious," she said, deactivating the recorder. "If what you're saying is true, the Protectorate will shut this operation down. But it won't be easy. The corporations on Rylon 7 have powerful allies." Lyra's voice wavered. "Please. They killed people. They tried to kill me." The woman studied Lyra for a moment, then nodded. "You did the right thing coming here. I'll make sure this gets to the right people. Stay here, I'll be back." Justice for Rylon 7. Weeks later, news of the Rylon 7 factories shut down spread across the galaxy. The Protectorate had launched a full-scale investigation, uncovering a vast network of corruption and illegal activities. The factory's owners were arrested, and the workers were freed from their oppressive contracts. Lyra watched the broadcast from a small apartment on the trading hub, her heart heavy with a mix of relief and sadness. She had done it, she had exposed the truth. But the victory felt hollow without Ethan. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it cautiously, only to freeze in shock. "Miss me?" Ethan said with a grin, his face bruised but alive. Lyra threw her arms around him, tears streaming down her face. "Ethan, I thought you dash." "Blew myself up," he said, laughing. "Not quite. Got out just in time. The Protectorate picked me up after the explosion. They patched me up and sent me here." Lyra pulled back, her glowing eyes filled with gratitude. "You saved me. You saved all of us." Ethan shrugged. "Couldn't let them get away with it. Besides, I had a promise to keep." A new beginning. As the galaxy moved on, so did Lyra and Ethan. The destruction of the factory and the exposure of its crimes became a symbol of hope for those oppressed by corruption and greed. Lyra, now a free woman, began working with the Protectorate to help others like her. Ethan returned to his roots as a mechanic, but this time, he worked with a purpose, using his skills to repair more than just machines. Together, they forged a bond stronger than the hardships they had faced, proving that even in the darkest places, compassion and courage could shine through. As they stood on the observation deck of the trading hub, gazing at the stars, Lyra spoke softly. "Do you think there are more places like Rylon 7 out there?" Ethan nodded. "Yeah. But that just means there's more work to do." Lyra smiled, her glowing eyes reflecting the light of the stars. "Then let's get to it."